I've been covering the Gus Lamont case for months now, and there's one question that keeps me awake at night. Why hasn't Jessica, Gus's mother, appeared publicly? Not once. This week, after 5 months, the parents finally released a statement. But even then, they didn't appear on camera. They didn't do interviews. Just a written message, a short video of Gus, and one additional photo. Why? And I think I might have figured out why. But before I get into this, I need to be very clear about something. What I'm about to share is a theory, my theory. It came from my own analysis of the patterns in this case. I have no inside information. I have no evidence to prove what I'm about to suggest. This is me trying to understand behavior that doesn't make sense and coming up with a possible explanation. And I also want to say this up front. My heart breaks for Gus's parents. Jessica and Josh have lost their little boy. That pain is unimaginable. Whatever happened, whatever the circumstances, nothing changes the fact that they are living through every parent's worst nightmare. So as I present this theory, please understand it comes from a place of trying to understand, not a place of judgment. Welcome back to Behind the Crime Scene. Today's video is different. Today I'm sharing a theory that could explain everything we've been seeing. The silence, the inconsistencies, the strategic releases, all of it. But I want you to understand this is speculation based on patterns, not facts I can prove. Here's what made me start thinking differently about this case. Gus Lamont had a younger brother. There's another child in this family, a child who's still alive, a child whose custody and well-being depends on what comes out about what happened to Gus. And that detail, that one fact that rarely gets mentioned, might be the key to understanding why this case has unfolded the way it has. Because if you're a parent and something terrible has happened to one of your children, your first instinct is to protect the child you still have. That's not cold. That's not suspicious. That's human nature. So here's my theory. And again, this is speculation based on what I've observed. I believe Gus died in an accident, not murder, not intentional harm. An accident, maybe involving a vehicle on the property, maybe involving farm equipment, maybe something else entirely. But an accident that happened under circumstances that could be considered negligent supervision. And I believe that the people who were supervising Gus when this accident happened made a catastrophic decision. Instead of calling for help immediately, instead of reporting what happened, they panicked. They made choices driven by fear. Fear of criminal charges, fear of losing the property, fear of lawsuits, and most of all, fear of what would happen to Gus's younger brother. Let me walk you through why I think this theory explains so much of what we've been seeing. And remember, I'm not claiming to know this is what happened. I'm saying this is a possibility that makes sense of the patterns. First, police have ruled out that Gus wandered off and got lost. They've said explicitly there's no evidence supporting that theory. They've also ruled out stranger abduction. The location made that virtually impossible. So we know that what happened to Gus involved someone who was there at the property, someone who knew him. Police have also made clear that both parents are not suspects. Jessica and Josh have been ruled out. So whatever happened, it didn't involve them directly. But someone at Oak Park Station has stopped cooperating with police and is now considered a suspect. Now, if my theory is correct, if this was an accident that happened under someone's supervision, think about what that means legally. In most jurisdictions, if a child dies due to negligent supervision, that can result in criminal charges. Manslaughter, criminal negligence causing death. These are serious charges that carry serious prison time. But beyond criminal charges, think about the civil liability. If Gus died due to negligence on someone's property, that property owner could face massive lawsuits. We're talking about Oak Park Station, a 60,000 hectare property worth millions of dollars. That entire legacy, that entire family wealth could be at risk. And then there's the custody issue. This is where my theory really comes together. If Gus died due to negligent supervision at his grandparents' property, what happens to his younger brother? Child Protective Services gets involved. They assess whether the surviving child is safe in that family environment. And there's a very real possibility they could remove that child from the family. Now put yourself in Jessica's position. And again, I'm theorizing here. I don't know what she's actually thinking or feeling. But imagine your son has died in a terrible accident. You're devastated. You're destroyed. And then you're told that if the truth about how he died comes out, you could lose your other son too. Child services could take him, or your ex-partner could use this to fight for full custody. What would you do? This is what I think might be the impossible choice Jessica is facing. Tell the truth about what happened to Gus, which could result in losing her surviving son. Or stay silent, protect the people who were there when Gus died, and keep her family together as much as possible. That's not a choice any parent should have to make. That's not fair. That's not justice, but it might explain why we haven't seen her make public appeals, why she hasn't appeared on camera, why the family has been so controlled in their communication, because every time she speaks, every detail she confirms or denies, she's walking a tightrope. She has to appear concerned and grieving, which she genuinely is. But she also can't say anything that might reveal circumstances that would jeopardize custody of her other child. And the grandparents, if they were the ones supervising when this accident happened, they're in an even more impossible position. They've lost their grandson. But they also know that if the truth comes out, they face criminal charges, they could lose their property, and they could be the reason Jessica loses Ronnie. So they've each hired separate, high-profile Adelaide criminal defence lawyers. Josie hired Andrew A., and Shannon hired Casey Isaacs. According to reports, since police attended their property on January 14th, both have been going about business as usual. Shannon was seen running errands in Jamestown. Josie was spotted grabbing a cappuccino and red velvet cake at a cafe in Peterborough. Now, some people see that and think it's callous. How can they be getting coffee and cake when their grandson is missing? But I see it differently. I see two people who are trying desperately to maintain normalcy while their entire world is collapsing. I see people who have made legal decisions to protect themselves, yes, but who are also living with unbearable guilt and grief. And Josh. According to reports, he's been living in Adelaide since Gus vanished. He abandoned that farmhouse he was renovating. In November, when a reporter approached him, he verbally lashed out. That's grief. That's a father who lost his son and doesn't have answers, who probably feels helpless, who might be angry at the people who were supervising Gus when whatever happened, happened. If my theory is correct, and again I emphasize this is speculation, it would explain so many of the strange aspects of this case. Let me walk through them. It explains the 5 months of silence followed by this week's carefully controlled communication. You don't speak publicly when anything you say could be used against you in criminal proceedings or custody battles. And when you finally do communicate, you do it through written statements that have been reviewed by lawyers. You release a video and photo, but you don't appear yourself. You ask for information about the smallest details, but you don't answer any questions. You control every piece of information. It explains why only one photo of Gus was released for so long. More photos mean more potential for someone to identify locations or circumstances that contradict whatever narrative is being protected. One carefully chosen photo is safer. It explains the inconsistencies between the video footage and the clothing description. If you're trying to create a narrative that protects people from negligence charges, you might describe Gus as being close to the house, safely playing, wearing appropriate footwear. But the real footage from a different day shows something else because you can't control what was captured before any of this happened. It explains why police seized a vehicle and a motorcycle, if those vehicles were involved in the accident, or if they were used to transport Gus's body after the fact. The forensic evidence and GPS data will tell that story. Police are building a case, and those vehicles are key evidence. It explains why police are searching in a national park adjacent to the property. If someone panicked after an accident and moved Gus's body off the property to avoid immediate discovery, a national park would make sense. It's accessible from Oak Park Station. It's vast. It's public land where discovery might take longer. And it explains what happened this week. After 5 months of complete silence, the parents released a statement. But notice how they did it. They didn't appear on camera. They didn't do interviews. They released a written statement along with a short video of Gus and one additional photo. The statement emphasized that they are united in their grief and pleaded for anyone with even the smallest detail to come forward. That word, united, it suggests there's been pressure to not be united. There's been a divide. And the fact that they still won't appear on camera, still won't do interviews, even while breaking their silence, that tells me they're still constrained. They're still walking that tightrope. My theory is that the divide is between the parents who want some version of truth and the grandparents who are desperately trying to protect everyone from legal consequences. This week's statement: progress or more control? Let's talk specifically about what happened this week, because I think it's significant. After 5 months of absolute silence, Jessica and Josh released a statement. They described themselves as united in their grief and united in their search for answers. They pleaded for anyone with information, even the smallest detail, to come forward. And they released a short video of Gus on his bike and one additional photograph. On the surface, this looks like progress. The parents are finally communicating. They're asking for help. They're putting Gus's face out there. But look at what they didn't do. They didn't appear on camera themselves. They didn't hold a press conference. They didn't answer questions from media. They didn't do interviews. This was a one-way communication, a carefully worded statement with controlled visual materials. And if my theory is correct, this makes perfect sense. Because appearing on camera means body language that can be analyzed. It means questions you can't control. It means potential slip-ups or emotional moments where you might say something you didn't intend to say. A written statement reviewed by lawyers is much safer. You say exactly what you need to say and nothing more. The plea for information about the smallest details is interesting too. It sounds like they're desperate for answers. But could it also be a way of finding out what witnesses or neighbours might know? What details are out there that could contradict whatever narrative is being protected? I'm not saying that's definitely what's happening, but when you're thinking strategically about legal exposure, knowing what information is circulating publicly becomes important. The fact that they're united is emphasized. United in grief. United in searching for answers. But notice they're not saying united in demanding transparency from everyone at Oak Park Station. They're not saying united in cooperating fully with police beyond what's legally required. The unity is about their shared loss and their shared desire for answers, but it's carefully bounded. Let's talk specifically about the custody issue because I think this might be the linchpin of the whole situation. According to the Daily Mail, Josh and Jessica never married. Josh lived at a different location, and according to sources, he attended Oak Park Station 2 days after Gus vanished. Reports indicate he got into a furious row with Josie during the desperate search, allegedly due to previous disputes. There's been reporting that the Murray family didn't approve of Josh, who had worked on their property, and didn't think he was a suitable match for Jessica. So you already have underlying family tension before any of this tragedy occurred. Jessica was living at Oak Park Station with her parents, raising 2 young children. According to neighbours in Adelaide, the family would split their time between the Outback Station and a home in Adelaide owned by Shannon Murray, which Josh also used. Now think about this dynamic. Jessica is 39 years old, never married to Josh, living primarily with her parents on their property, dependent on them for housing. Josh reportedly had a farmhouse in Ballali North that a neighbour said he was renovating so Jessica, Gus, and their younger son Ronnie could move in. But that house now sits abandoned. What does that tell you about what changed after Gus disappeared? If Gus died under the grandparents' supervision due to an accident that could be considered negligent, think about what that means for custody dynamics. Josh, who already had a contentious relationship with the Murrays, who already wasn't considered good enough for their daughter, now has potential grounds to argue for custody. He could say that his son died while in the care of the maternal grandparents, and therefore his other son may not be safe in that environment. Jessica would be caught in the middle of this. If she supports the truth coming out about negligent supervision, she might be strengthening any custody claim Josh might make. If she protects her parents and their version of events, she protects her current living situation and custody arrangement with her surviving son. That's an impossible position for any mother. And the grandparents would know this. They would know that Jessica's silence is essential to everyone being protected. So they might be using the custody of the surviving child as implicit leverage. Not in a cruel way, necessarily, but in a desperate, we're all in this together. We all need to protect each other way. I want to be clear. I don't know what kind of accident might have occurred. I'm speculating based on what makes sense given the evidence. But let me walk through a few possibilities. One possibility is a vehicle accident. We know police seized a motorcycle and another vehicle. In rural properties, vehicles are constantly moving. There's dust. There's limited visibility sometimes. A small child could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Someone backing up might not see him. Someone on a motorcycle might not realize he's there until it's too late. It would be a horrific accident, but it would be an accident. Another possibility is farm equipment. Farms have machinery that's dangerous. A child who's curious and unsupervised, even for a short time, could get into something they shouldn't, could get hurt in ways that are fatal. A third possibility, though police have searched the dams extensively, is drowning. They drained those dams twice. Why would they do that unless they had reason to believe drowning was possible? But if drowning is what happened, the question becomes, how long was Gus unsupervised near water? And that question leads to negligent supervision issues. In any of these scenarios, the immediate aftermath would involve panic. Someone realizes Gus is badly hurt or dead. They have seconds to decide, call for help, and face the consequences, or try to handle this quietly. And in that moment of panic, they might make the worst decision possible. This is the question everyone asks. If it was an accident, why not just call police and ambulance immediately? Why hide it? And that's a fair question. But I think the answer might be that in that moment of discovery, someone did a cost-benefit analysis, even if they didn't consciously realize they were doing it. On one hand, call police immediately. Face questions about supervision. Face potential charges. Face lawsuits. Face the possibility of Jessica losing the other child. Face the destruction of the family legacy and property. Face prison time. On the other hand, hide what happened. Create a different narrative. Hope that Gus's body is never found, or is found in a way that doesn't point to negligence. Keep the family together. Keep the property. Keep the surviving child safe in the family. In that moment of panic and grief, someone might have convinced themselves that the second option was the better choice. Not because they're evil, not because they didn't love Gus, but because they were terrified of losing everything else too. And once you make that choice, once you hide the body and create a false narrative, you can't undo it. You're committed. You have to maintain the lie, because admitting the truth now means admitting to obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, lying to police. The consequences get worse, not better. I want to pause here and say something from my heart. If my theory is anywhere close to correct, I cannot imagine the pain this family is living with. Losing Gus would be unbearable on its own, but losing him in an accident and then having to hide it, having to lie about it, having to maintain this false narrative for months while living with guilt and grief, that's a special kind of hell. Before we go further, I want to talk about Jessica herself, because understanding who she is helps us understand her situation. According to the Daily Mail, Jessica is 39 years old and grew up in Jamestown, a small town with a population of about 1,400. She attended Jamestown Community School until at least year 10. Yearbook photos show she had the same blonde curls as Gus. She was on the touch football team, took dance workshops, and was described as very clever. But here's what's striking. Locals say she is shy, quietly spoken, and was rarely seen in the area even before Gus went missing. Some locals recalled seeing Gus in the company of his grandmother Shannon, but not with Jessica. She essentially disappeared from public view years ago. The last time she was publicly photographed before this tragedy was in 2019 at the South Australian Music Awards, where she appeared alongside Josh, who was the frontman of a country group called the Cut Snakes. So we're talking about someone who is naturally private, who has lived a very quiet life, who is already not visible in her community. And now she's at the centre of a national tragedy and a major crime investigation. Is it any wonder she hasn't appeared publicly? Even without my theory about custody and legal pressures, her natural personality seems to be someone who would avoid the spotlight. But there's more to consider. According to sources, Jessica is shocked by the police statement declaring this a major crime and identifying a suspect at the property. Shocked. Think about what that word means. If she knew exactly what happened, would she be shocked? Or does shocked suggest that maybe she wasn't there when whatever happened occurred? Maybe she's learning information along with the rest of us? And here's another heartbreaking detail. Josh's farmhouse in Ballali North, the one he was renovating for Jessica and the boys, now stands empty, abandoned since early October. There are unshorn sheep taking refuge under a veranda where Gus once stored his bicycles. That image just destroys me. The life they were building, the home they were preparing, all of it stopped when Gus disappeared. I don't think anyone in this situation is a monster. I think they're people who made terrible decisions in a moment of panic, and are now trapped by those decisions. And I think Jessica, specifically, is living in an impossible situation. She's grieving her son. She's probably angry at whoever was supervising him. She's terrified of losing her other child, Ronnie. She may be caught between her parents and Josh regarding custody. She's facing legal and financial pressure. She's naturally shy and private, thrust into a national spotlight. That's too much for any person to bear. So when I analyse this case, when I point out the silence and the inconsistencies, I'm not doing it to be cruel. I'm doing it because I believe Gus deserves the truth. And I believe the only way this family finds any kind of peace is if the truth comes out, whatever the consequences. Based on what we know about the investigation, I think police probably have a pretty clear picture of what happened. They've seized vehicles that likely have GPS data showing exactly where they went on September 27th. They've seized electronics that probably have search histories, communications, maybe even deleted files that have been recovered. They've conducted extensive searches that found no evidence of Gus wandering off or being abducted. They've identified a suspect who has stopped cooperating. They're planning additional searches in specific locations, which means they have intelligence pointing them somewhere particular. I think what police are doing now is building an absolutely airtight case before they make arrests or file charges, because they know this is going to be a difficult prosecution. They know the family has resources for good legal representation. They know that any procedural mistakes could sink the case. So they're being methodical. They're being patient. They're making sure every piece of evidence is documented and preserved properly. The forensic testing on those vehicles, that's going to take time. But when it comes back, it's going to tell a story. DNA evidence, soil samples, fiber evidence, GPS coordinates, all of it will paint a picture of what happened and who was involved. I want to emphasize one more time, this theory came from my own analysis. I don't have inside information. I don't know what actually happened to Gus. I could be completely wrong about all of this. This is me trying to make sense of patterns and behaviours that seem unusual. But if I'm right, even partially right, this is one of the saddest cases I've ever covered, because it would mean that Gus died in an accident that was preventable. And then, in the aftermath of that tragedy, people he loved made choices that compounded that tragedy, made it worse. Made it something they all have to live with forever. And Jessica, if she's in the position I think she might be in, she's a victim in this too. She's a mother who lost one child and is desperately trying not to lose another. She's caught in a system and a situation that's forcing her to choose between truth and family. And that's not a choice anyone should have to make. What Gus deserves is the truth. His parents deserve to know exactly what happened to their little boy. The public deserves to understand what went wrong so we can prevent it from happening to other children. And everyone involved in this situation deserves the chance to tell the truth, face the consequences, and eventually find some kind of peace and redemption. But right now, we're in this holding pattern, waiting for forensic results, waiting for someone to break, waiting for the truth to finally come out. And while we wait, a family is being destroyed from the inside by secrets and fear. To Jessica and Josh, I'm so sorry for your loss. I cannot imagine your pain. I hope you find peace and answers. To Gus, you deserved better. You deserve to grow up and live your life. And you deserve for people to know the truth about what happened to you, no matter how difficult that truth might be. This is behind the crime scene. This was my theory. It might be right. It might be completely wrong. But it's my attempt to understand behavior that otherwise doesn't make sense. And I wanted to share it with you because I think understanding the possible motivations in this case helps us have compassion for everyone involved, even while demanding truth and accountability. If you have information about this case, please contact South Australia Police or Crime Stoppers at 1800 333 00. If this video gave you a different perspective on the case, I'd appreciate if you'd share it. And leave your thoughts in the comments, but please be kind. This is a tragedy. Real people are hurting. We can analyse and question while still being compassionate. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.